Welcome back to my literal favorite video of the year. And that's right, it's going to be my tier ranking of all the books that made me cry in 2023. I read 75 books last year and I cried in 30 of them, which is keeping it at a very consistent about 40%. Actually, let's figure out exactly what percentage that is. 30 divided by 75, exactly 40%. That is my average. I cry in 40% of the books I read. So like, are my standards to cry high? No. But I do like vary in my crying. So we have 5 levels. They're based on Taylor Swift songs. Starting with Champagne Problems, barely crying at all, to Ronan, like literally I'm sobbing. You're gonna have to peel me off the floor with a spatula. I can't breathe. I can't speak to you. Levels of tears. And I'm gonna walk you through all the books I cried while I was reading in 2023. And I'm gonna tell you where they land on the list. These, I think, are actually in the order I read them. So the first book I actually read in 2023 did make me cry. And that is Daisy Hates the Great Undoing. This is the most recent book in the Magnolia Parks series as recording. The next book comes out next month. I'm very excited about it. And I would say this made me cry a bigger than the whole sky amount. If you know what happens at the end of this book, or if you know what happens at the end of Magnolia Park's Long Way Home, which they have about the same ending, that did make me cry once again. I'll cry over a rom-com any day of the week, and these books have like some extra angsty emotional writing, so catch me crying in all of them. Then we had Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen. This is just like a classic rom-com cry. You'll see a lot of the rom-coms end up in Champagne Problems, and that's just mostly because when two people are like confessing their feelings and they're like overcoming some deep emotional blockage that prevented them from being together, I will tear up. Like, it's just pretty standard for me. I'm glad my mom died. I actually didn't cry a lot in this. People talked about how emotional it was, and I listened to Jeanette McCurdy's memoir about mostly her experience with her mother. I listened to it as an audiobook, and she does narrate it, and there's one spot in the audiobooks where her voice breaks while she's narrating it, and that did do me in. I feel like I cry significantly less if I'm listening to an audiobook. I don't know, maybe it feels a little less private because I'm sharing the experience with the narrator, but yeah, the fact that her voice broke did make me a little bit teary. Then we had Heartless by Elsie Silver. This is a single dad nanny type romance on a horse ranch, so like lots happening. It was a really good time. I really enjoyed it, but it did make me cry a little bit. I would say the kids will get me. I would move this up one level. Marjorie cried a little bit more than just like a single like rom-com tear. Then next up, we had Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. I didn't love this book. It wasn't one of my favorites. And I feel like it's one of those books that's really set up to make you cry. Like the twists, like it's got some like Colleen Hoover level twists in that they're like really a little bit emotionally manipulative, which they're never my favorite. They'll get me, but I don't feel great about them. I think I cried a little bit more than like a single tear, but didn't cry a ton. Wasn't like bawling over it. Then we had Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I think this, after some careful consideration, is my favorite of all of Ali Hazelwood's published stuff so far. I loved it. It gave me the classic rom-com tear. But it was really good. We're really low. Our cries are not too hard so far this year. I actually think we had like less, although our quantity, again, we're keeping it right at 40%. I do think most of them were a lighter cry this year. Party of Your World by Abby Jimenez, my favorite rom-com of the year, made me cry the appropriate rom-com amount, which is just like a few tears as they overcome their deep emotional insecurities. You know how it goes. Babel, we're going to move up to Bigger Than the Whole Sky. Babel was not a super emotional book. Maybe I'll move it down one. I actually didn't feel like I loved this book. Second favorite book of the year. Loved it a lot, but I felt very like, mentally, like intellectually connected to it. I didn't feel super emotionally connected to the characters, but the ending still did get me. I still really I did fall for that ending. Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This is a time travel thriller that is really about like motherhood and connection, and it was so beautiful. Like I loved this thriller. I'm kind of sad I didn't make my favorites list because now that I'm thinking about it, it like really was up there. Was it better than None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell? Maybe. I really loved it. I thought it was really beautiful. I thought it was really fun. I thought it was very different. And some of the conversations around motherhood did make me cry as a non-mother. The American Roommate Experiment I remember remember next to nothing about this book. But I do think it made me cry like a fairly normal, typical rom-com amount. Okay, you're going to see several Lily Gold books on here. And these two, so Lily Gold writes kind of similar books every time. We're following this heroine who has had some like traumatic, upsetting event happen to her every single time, and they all deal with kind of like heavier topics, honestly, like infertility and like stalking and like revenge, explicit images. Like, they deal with like heavy, like these women have gone through it, and she treats the topics with like the like, I think, the weight they like deserve. But also then these girls enter into like a spicy teamwork romance where there's 3 dudes and 1 girlie every time. And you know what? 3 out of the 4 of them that I read this year did make me cry. Nanny for the Neighbors also made me cry a little bit. And then we'll get to Triple Duty Bodyguards when we get there. We took a little break. We read 3 Lily Golds in a row. 3 Swedish Mountain Men didn't make me cry. But it was still good. I still really enjoyed it. Okay, Anna Jan by Kate Canterbury. This one was a cute, classic rom-com cry. We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. I think this was slightly more. I can't remember why, but I just had this, like, remembrance that I cried a little bit more than typical in We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. Oh my gosh, things are looking not that tearful this year. But that's about to change, because then I read The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, and this was like not quite Ronin levels, but I cried multiple times in this and cried like pretty substantially. In order to get to Ronin levels, I do need to like feel like I like can't speak, and I don't think we got to that level, but I cried like fairly hard in multiple spots in this. This is a like a mystery sort of novel, but the like detectives, the people we're following that are trying to solve these cases, live in like a retirement community. They're all like above the age of 65, like they're elderly, and so like death is like a large part of their lives, because like your friends and family when you're that age are dying around you, and whew, it made me cry. And I've heard it just gets more tearful from there. It's amazing. It's so good. The description didn't sound that appealing to me. Didn't sound like something I would love, but I like really have found myself enjoying it. Yoke by Mary H.K. Choi. I actually only cried a little bit in this one. I'm going to put it down here. I think the writing is really exquisite, and I think the way that Mary H.K. Choi explores sister relationships is amazing. I actually expected to cry a little bit more in here, but the novel isn't written to make you like super emotional. I don't think, like, it is, like, we're dealing with emotional topics, and so that did make me tear up a couple times, but it's not written to be like emotionally exploitative. You know, does that make sense to you? It makes sense to me. Ashes in the Star-Cursed King. This made me cry like a pretty decent amount. This is the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series by Carissa Broadbent. It follows like vampires and humans in this like vampire world. It's very good. It's a romantasy novel. But the second one, oh my gosh, I don't want to like talk about what made me cry in this, because it'd be a spoiler, because it's the second book in a series, but this one made me cry like a pretty substantial amount because of some of the topics we explore, and especially because of the way it like wrapped up. I like really thought she handled the stuff she decided to tackle with this really beautifully, and I loved it. I thought it was great. Happy Place, Family Henry. This, maybe not quite up there. We'll put it down there. Happy Place, Family Henry made me cry a lot. It made me cry a significant amount. Maybe not quite as much as Beach Read, but in Happy Place we were following this couple that was engaged and broke up and is now pretending to date, and both of them are dealing with such deep emotional internal struggles. I just like the way they overcame them, the way they dealt with them was great and gorgeous and amazing. I loved it. Wynn is one of my favorite Emily Henry men. I think him and Alex Nielsen are like head to head. I haven't reread Happy Place yet, so I like can't truly like put them head to head, but yeah, very, very good and very, very tearful. Tomorrow is going to be Ronin Levels of Tears. This book is a little light, like very much light, but like tonally feels very similarly. It's following 2 friends. We kind of get a third one tossed in there a little bit later, but we're following these 2 who met when they were like preteens, and it follows them through their teenage years into college and then into their like early adulthood, and it is just such a beautiful story about friendship and about just like lives and what those look like. And I think anyone who's read Tomorrow will tell you that like it's probably gonna make you cry. Like, it's a sad book, and there's some sad twists and turns in there. Game of Thrones, the first one. This is actually the only, I've been reading through the Game of Thrones series. I'm on the 4th book currently. This is the only book in the series that has made me cry. It is not, again, not written to be super emotional. It is like definitely like, we're not spending a lot of time lingering, despite the fact there are quite a few deaths and like there are emotional ripples from those deaths. I don't think they were spending a lot of time lingering in the grief. But Game of Thrones itself did make me cry. It made me cry. Whose death made me cry? I think the death, I don't want to spoil anything. I won't tell you whose death made me cry, but someone's death in this book definitely made me cry. Not like a crazy amount, but like a decent amount. Triple Duty Bodyguards by Lily Gold. This book made me cry actually like a significant amount. This one is a bodyguard romance. We're following this like young actress who is being like stalked like pretty aggressively, and these 3 bodyguards that are hired to take care of her and like protect her, and it's very, very good. But it just like the way that Lily Gold explores these topics and simultaneously has some of the spiciest, probably the spiciest books I've ever read, is like truly astounding to me. She's been dealing with some like health issues, so she hasn't come out with a book recently, but like I am just eagerly awaiting the next book because like they're so good. Such a delight. The No Show by Beth O'Leary. This book is a book that is very hard to talk about because you don't want to spoil it and you don't fully find out what happens until towards the very end of the novel, but it is often like pitched as a romance novel, and like despite the fact there is a romance, I don't think it is a romance novel. We're following 3 women who all get stood up on Valentine's Day, and we're following their lives and this relationship that they're in that stands up on Valentine's Day, and they're all looking for something different in this relationship, and it's really fascinating, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I think Beth O'Leary does a good job. She also wrote The Flat Share, I believe. I hope I'm not wrong. And I think she does a good job writing like sweet and like slightly emotional romances. The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I love Ashley Poston. And this book deals pretty heavily with grief, but I feel like it does it in a pretty lighthearted way. It feels very much like a Hallmark movie. I feel like this is like the Halloween Town version of a rom-com. We're following this writer who can see ghosts, and she winds up going back to the small town she grew up in where her family runs the local funeral home because her dad has passed away. And so we are like in the weeks after her dad's death as she's like coming to terms with her dad's death and is also dealing with this ghost. She's like trying to help this ghost who she knew in her regular life crossover, and there's also a romance that is happening, and it was just like so sweet, and a book about grief will make me cry. Wait and Hope, which is Hermione fanfiction. This made me cry like a pretty decent amount. The premise of this one is like memory loss. So at the beginning of the novel, Hermione wakes up. She doesn't remember anything from the last, I think, 7 years. And in that time, she's married Draco Malfoy. And like what last she remembers, she was like enemies with Draco Malfoy. And it's a novel about Draco trying to like remind her, like to make her fall in love with him again. Does that sound like the cheesiest book ever? It was really good. I really had a great time. Draco is so sweet in it. True Love Experiment, classic Christina Lauren, classic rom-com. We're following this girl. She's a romance writer, and she gets essentially put on this like bachelorette type show where she is going to be dating a bunch of guys, but they're like based on like the romance tropes that she writes. So she's got like the vampire, I can't remember all the guys, but she winds up falling for the producer instead, and it was so fun, such a delight, and it was really cute. He is a kid. I love a single dad romance. It was cute. I loved it. Teared up. Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. This book actually surprised me at how little I cried. Like I cried just a very tinge amount, and because it's taking place after this woman's mom's died. So this woman's mom's died, and she's going back to the resort where she grew up to like take over since her mom is gone, and it's like a second chance romance with a guy she knew for like one day, one summer, many years ago. And you would think I would have cried a lot because it's about like her in the like aftermath of her mom's death, but it really doesn't spend a lot of time on the grief. So I like teared up very little in this book for like what it was. Would have expected more tears. The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I cried a little less than the Dead Romantics, but I did cry a decent amount in this one. This time we are also kind of in the throes of grief in a different way. This girl has lost her aunt recently and is now living in her aunt's apartment that she inherited, and the apartment is magic and can travel. It travels back in time 7 years. Sometimes it slips back in time, hence the 7 year slip. She has a romance with the boy that lived there 7 years earlier. It's delicious and delightful, and by delicious I mean like there's a chef, and so there's a lot of food talk too. It was good. Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This book it made me cry like a pretty significant amount. We're following these two doctors. It's the follow-up to Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, which is down here, which is my favorite romance of the year, and this was like a close runner-up. I had to pick like one to be my favorite Abby Jimenez, and I went with Part of Your World, but yours truly is so good. We're following the best friend from Part of Your World, and she has recently gone through a divorce, and her brother is needing like a kidney transplant, and so like that's kind of where we find her. And then the hero, the man that we meet, he is also a doctor at the same hospital. She's a doctor, and he's just started working there, and he has like really bad anxiety, and we really explore that through his internal world. And they wind up needing to fake date because he needs like a date to his ex-girlfriend's wedding, who's marrying his brother. Kind of convoluted, but it's like a really sweet story. And I think the way in which they explored like anxiety, it was just like really beautifully done, and I felt like this one was a little bit heavier than Part of Your World, and just like gorgeous and amazing, and I loved it. It was fantastic. Okay, Out on a Limb, gorgeous, another one of my favorite romances this year. Just like a really sweet, solid Kindle Unlimited rom-com. There's an accidental pregnancy at the beginning of this, but I just thought it was like so sweet and tender. Like when I talk about this book, I like talk about just like how sweet it was, and I just like a really beautiful little story. Okay, last one, and the most tearful one, definitely Mockingjay. I won't spoil Hunger Games for you. If you know, you know. I cried from that moment, you know the moment, through the end of the book. And I was crying so hard. There was a moment there where I thought I might, like, throw up. Like, it was making me nauseous. I was crying so hard. Which is, like, that's when I know a book has really got me. There's only been a few books that have done that to me. And this is going to join the ranks of those. I don't think I had such a strong reaction the first time I read this. I read this when I was, like, in high school. I doubt I had such a strong reaction because I don't remember it. But, oh my gosh, just, like, the bleakness. And I finished this book and I felt, like, drained. I was like, this book is so bleak. Like, I don't remember it being so bleak. It was just bleak. The ending is hard. Like, there are good parts and there are happy parts, but there's so much sadness. Okay, I am going to talk spoilers now. So, leave. I'll put a timestamp of when I'm done. Yeah, I just cried from the moment that Prim died through the end. I remember I was, like, crying, and she's, like, talking to Peeta, and, like, Peeta still doesn't recognize her, and then there's this moment in which we find out Annie was pregnant with Finnick's baby. And that was when I was like, I was done for at that point. I was like completely done for. I couldn't believe that. Just like devastating. Truly like devastating, this book. And just to like realize that like the reason that Katniss went into the Hunger Games in the first book at all was to like keep her sister safe, and through the like trials of this war, she wasn't able to do that. Like everything she did, like she created this revolution, everything is better in the districts for it. Like we see her as an adult like living her life with Peeta, but like her sister isn't there, and like she can't hang out with her mom anymore, and like Gail is off, and like and she's like devastated. She's like, keep a list of happy things because she's so, her life is just like has been destroyed by this revolution. Ugh, I'm gonna cry talking about it. Anyway, that's all. Okay, if you left for spoilers, you missed me almost crying about Mockingjay again. Very emotional. Anyway, those are all the books I cried in 2023. It was not a very heavy reading year for me in terms of how many books I read, but, you know, I'm glad I'm keeping up the percentage of how many I'm crying in. Glad we're keeping that steady. Holding steady. I hope to cry to more books this year. Have I cried at any yet? Yes, I've already cried to books this year. Good news. We've already started on our list of books I've cried to for 2024. Okay. Have a good rest of your life. I hope you find some books that make you cry.